Welcome back to my conversation with Sara McLean, a former assistant director of the commercial litigation branch's fraud section for the Justice Department, and now a partner with Aiken. There's a big influx of private equity interest into government contractors as well. You're seeing them buy up certain ones, and then there's the what they call the non-traditionals that are coming in. So that's fascinating to me because a lot of the folks in the private equity world don't really understand government contracting, and they could easily find themselves in the middle of a situation where they, to your point, recklessness versus intentional fraud. I didn't mean to do it. Yeah, but you just didn't do it the right way that you said you were going to do it the right way, which is different. And maybe dig into that recklessness versus intentional fraud. And here I'll admit, not having gone to law school, what are the legal implications? What should people focus on, like, as the difference?
Okay. Yeah. Well, intentional fraud is sort of, you know, sit down, come up with the plan of attack. Here's what we're going to do. I mean, it's hard for me to really even imagine what that would be in the cybersecurity context, but I'm probably just not, I don't have that creative, mind. Um, I think, but but the False Claims Act, so the False Claims Act certainly penalizes that. And there are False Claims Act cases that are, well, I mean, okay, here's an example, hiding the cover up, hiding something from the government. There are things that could happen where you could look at that body of evidence and think this is intentional. Even criminal cases are not handled by the civil fraud section, but it's possible to have in any kind of False Claims Act case, to have an actual, crime has been committed. And also at the same time, the government is out money, and there's False Claims Act liability for treble damages and penalties for that. So that's an example of what's intentional fraud. They're really just like, think of the criminal stuff, set out to do it and did it. Then there's deliberate ignorance, which the cases describe as an ostrich hiding its head in the sand. I don't even know if the hostages, like, do they hide their head in the sand? But this is numerous courts have used that image, and you can imagine it. Like, I don't want to know, sure. I mean, there's all sorts of, we can get into this later, but with CMMC, there's, certifications that need to be signed. So just say signing a certification without wanting to know, bothering to know, without informing oneself about, the true facts, that could be considered deliberate ignorance. And then there's reckless disregard, which, is something more than a mistake. It's not, but, but less than those other two things. It's sometimes some courts have described it as gross negligence. Negligence would be a mistake. I don't know if that helps for the non-lawyers, but corporations not informing themselves about the requirements, not taking the steps that are necessary. It's not through necessarily like ill intent, but it's not what the government bargained for, and it's not just an accident. It's more than that, quite a bit more than that.
No, it absolutely does help. I think one of the challenges is people think, well, I didn't mean to do it. All right, I didn't do it on purpose. And but that's not what we're talking about here. Is you had requirements, you didn't meet the requirements. That was reckless of you versus, oh, don't tell anyone. We won't do it, and they'll never find out because they're the government. So I think that's absolutely helpful.
Exactly, that's right. Yep.
You mentioned CMMC. Let's talk maybe a little bit about that as well. That is something that's new. It's getting implemented. It just got implemented in earlier this month, phase one by the Defense Department. Talk a little bit about how that's going to play into maybe how you think it may play into the Justice Department and how it's looking at vendors for cyber requirements. Give me a sense of the connection that Justice maybe before you left, as you were preparing for the implementation of CMMC.
Right. Well, I mean, it is a call loud and clear from the agency that they care about cybersecurity, and that they want their cybersecurity requirements to be met. And in any False Claims Act case, there's a need for the government to prove materiality. It's not like every single violation of a government contract or government requirement is going to lead to this potential treble damages liability. It has to be knowing, and it also has to be material. So it's not just, this was on pink paper and it was supposed to be on blue paper. It's got to be something that actually, matters to whether the government is willing to pay the money. So when you see, CMMC, which has been in the works, from the first Trump administration through the last administration and into the second Trump administration, and, all this effort from DoD going into, getting companies to basically protect this sensitive information by meeting these NIST 800-171 controls. When you see that, it definitely lays the groundwork for showing materiality, and that's one thing that's kind of important about that development. Also, it does involve more robust certifications, and that is something that can be a factor in a case being a False Claims Act case being more or less likely to be one that the government would take over, because signing a certification when the information is not true starts to look like a lie, which starts to look like the more intentional type of fraud that we were talking about than a mistake. It looks like recklessness to be signing certifications without doing the sort of review to know that the information that's in there is right. So that's a big deal. The implementation of the certifications, the CMMC is going to have for a lot of vendors third-party assessments, and that that probably will cut down on the non-compliance. I'm sure that DoD hopes that it will. There's still some possibilities there for False Claims Act cases for where companies are not forthright with the assessor and end up getting past the assessment, but through something that can violate the False Claims Act anyway.
One of the things you mentioned when it talks about the False Claims Act is the DoD really signaling this for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Hey, we need you to do this. This is important to us. When you talk about showing materiality, that's the idea of there's no way you could not have known about this. That's what you're getting to, right? Like it's not like, oh, I didn't know I had to comply with CMMC. I didn't know that. Beyond the fact that it's in your contract and DoD called it out, there's years and years of DoD talking about this, getting ready, accepting comments. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, that issue probably goes more to the sort of state of mind, the recklessness, deliberate ignorance, or actual knowledge. The materiality is about like what matters to the government for its payment decision. Is this a requirement that matters versus doesn't matter? So I mean, fair point that the sort of history with DoD can we'll go to both of those points. I would say though on the sort of state of mind, I mean, any given requirement can be so complicated, and so that even if DoD is trying to tell people this is what you need to do, it is still very possible to misunderstand that and make a mistake. So it's not the end of it's definitely not the end of the sort of inquiry. But yes, it does make it probably less likely that somebody could say, I just had absolutely no idea that there was any cybersecurity requirement at all.
Do you find that most of the time companies, well, to your point of recklessness versus intentional fraud, they thought they had it right, but it turns out they didn't? Or do you find that many of these cases show they knew what they were supposed to do, they just didn't do it, and it was I don't know about willful disregard, but you get my point of like it's kind of hard these days to assume. How can you not think that cybersecurity is important, right? We've seen so many problems, we've seen so many hacks, we've all lost personal information mostly. It's one of those things where you're like, it's a head scratcher, or I don't know, maybe it's not for you, having seen so many cases over the years.
Well, I think it's a lot of not understanding the requirements. I mean, the cybersecurity requirements apply to all different kinds of businesses of all sizes. So there have been some, pretty small contractors who've gotten themselves into trouble in these cases. But of course, I mean, the sensitive information is out there and it needs to be protected even by, DoD would say it needs to be protected by the small contractors, just like it needs to be protected by the big contractors. But there can be companies that are not hugely sophisticated in their contracting who've signed on to a whole host of government requirements, probably without understanding a lot of them, and certainly without understanding, as apparent in some of these cases, the cybersecurity requirements. So it's a lot of there's a lot of not understanding and not, as I said, taking the putting in the resources to get the legal and technical assistance that's needed to understand, what a company has committed itself to. And there was probably a time when that nothing much happened. Other than, as you pointed out, you lose your information, you lose the government's information, you lose your own information, bad things could happen, but probably not a lot was going to happen as far as the government coming after it. And that is, I think, what has changed in the last few years.
Absolutely. I think there's a clear evidence that says, hey, we used to just shake our finger at you. Now we're going to come make it painful. And I think for good reason. I mean, I think the cyber actors know that they can get information. We've heard the stories about China stealing government contractors' plans for fighter jets and other weapon systems. And all of that is really what pushed DoD to get CMMC going. Sarah, in the last maybe 5 minutes we have together, and then you may have kind of hit upon them in some ways, but a lot of companies, what can they do to protect themselves? What are some of your, if you will, non-lawyer top recommendations, right? Non-legal advice recommendations? What are some of the things you've seen work well among, for companies who want to kind of protect themselves, but also get in front of any potential key tam or whistleblower lawsuit?
Right. So I did say it already, but I'll say it again. Understand the requirements. So get whatever legal technical assistance is needed to understand the requirements, so that and then meet them and make a good faith effort to meet them. I think another thing is being really careful about representations that are made to the government. As we did hit on this, but when the government is looking at a set of allegations, and by the way, I mean, most QTM allegations that come to the government do not result in the government taking any action at all. So the government is looking at, what's been brought, doing an investigation, trying to figure out, is there not just taking sort of hook, line, and sinker what sometimes really impassioned, former employee or current employee is saying happened in their organization. So the government is trying to look at it. So when the government sees evidence of something that looks like a lie, that is sort of a huge, red flag, and something that makes the government continue to pursue the matter, and may lead to needing to pay some sort of a financial recovery. If, on the other hand, the government looks at what looks like, disclosure, good faith efforts, things that are being said to the government that come across, when you're looking at it after the fact, at the emails and the hearing what the witnesses are saying, that looks like, wow, these people were trying to be honest with the government and just messed, that makes it look like this is somebody who just messed up, a mistake was made. So I think that's huge. Just really, really watching the representations. I know, I mean, the non-lawyers, sign things without reading them and understanding them, but in this area, that's just a really, really bad mistake. And then the other thing I would say is, managing employees' concerns and complaints. And I've been a manager, the sort of black box where they don't hear back anything, they have no idea what's happened with the thing that they've brought to your attention. I think that can backfire and lead to people having the sense that I've got to, I have to do something about this. I have to report it. I've run into a brick wall, internally. Now I'm going to take it outside. And that leads, just as a very practical matter, that leads to QTAMs being filed. And I'll just say, actually, I was going to say 3, but a 4th is, considering that disclosure, coming to the government and disclosing is something, it's complicated, and the dynamics of that are difficult. And I've seen it many, many, many times from the government side. I realize it's not something that on the other side, folks have a ton of familiarity with how it works, but particularly in the cyber space, the government has broadcast through numerous press releases that can be read that they're looking for these kinds of disclosures, cooperation, remediation, that there's credit available. And I think that can really work to the advantage of companies who want to take advantage. The statute of limitations on a False Claims Act case is 6 to 10 years. So things that people are looking at now, and they're fixing things now that have not been right in the past. There's still huge exposure still for that, and there's an opportunity to manage it.
The managing employees' concerns and complaints is something I always say to folks. As a journalist, people come to us in the last resort, right? They've tried everything else. They have nowhere left to go. They come to journalists because they feel like they want to get their story out. I imagine it's very similar with Ketam, where I've tried everything. I've taken it to the CEO, the president. I've done my best. No one's listening. This is a bad problem. That what I feel like I have no place to go. So I think that's a really important point for companies to take really care about. Sarah, we have just a minute or so left, and before I let you go, I know it's hard since you've just left the Justice Department, but going forward, do you see other evolutions of the False Claims Act as it relates to cybersecurity that we haven't touched upon, or what folks should keep in mind or look out for as you go into private practice? Same thing. Is there something you're going to be paying attention to as the False Claims Act continues to evolve?
Well, I think there are going to be a lot more of these announcements. I mean, there's been a huge uptick, as I said, just since the beginning of the administration, and I think that is just absolutely going to continue. The cases the investigations are complex. They take time to develop, and so I think there are going to be many more announcements. And there's a lot of support. As I said, the cyber enforcement is now embedded in what the Justice Department does every day. It's described, as the bread and butter by, leadership is said as part of the bread and butter. And if you read the press releases that have come out since January, you have the top leadership in the DOJ Civil Division, the DOD CIO's office, all saying this is super important, and we're going to do this. So I think we're going to see a lot of that, and then tended to that, a lot of new cases coming in. This is, I think, here to stay.
All right. No, cybersecurity is not going anywhere. With the influx of CMMC, the implementation of it, I know a lot of the civilian agencies are looking at what happens with DoD and saying, can we borrow or have something similar around CMMC? So I think you're absolutely right. This is only going to get an area of more focus from the Justice Department, and of course, more focus from industry. Sarah, unfortunately, we're out of time for this session of the Risk and Compliance Exchange. I really appreciate talking to you. I learned so much. And I told you I like to geek out over my False Claims Act, my little bit of knowledge I do know. So let me thank my guest. Sarah McLean is a former assistant director of the Commercial Litigation Branch's Fraud Section for the Justice Department, and now a partner with Aiken. Sarah, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
I'm Jason Miller, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Risk and Compliance Exchange.